Let's do a tier list of all 6 cost cards in Marvel Snap. Alright, no need to hold up here, we're just going to get straight into it. Couple things before we start. Scar and Arishem are no longer, or I should say Arishem was never a 6 cost card, I don't know why Arishem is in here. But Scar is no longer a 6 cost card, so we're going to be disregarding him. But all the other 6 cost cards should be accurate. This is every 6 cost card in the game currently. We're going to go ahead, do a quick ranking here in this tier list. As you can see here, I did simplify the tier list a little bit. I just don't need all the extra rows, especially for, when you don't have as many cards, in comparison to the rest of the game. So I simplified it. Obviously you have S tier, which is, everyone knows what S tier is. You have A, B, and then simply just trash. I would say A tier is probably just, it's a great card. S tier is a perfect card, it's amazing. A is great, B is okay, and then obviously trash is self-explanatory. I don't know, I might end up tweaking that here in a little bit, but I'm gonna leave this for now. We're gonna go ahead and get straight into the tier list here, starting off with Agatha. Now, Agatha is probably really only viable in, I wanna say discard decks like Hela. There was a point in the meta where Agatha was actually taking over the meta in the discard decks with Black Knight and such. So Agatha does have her place. I think she's teetering between trash and B. I think simply because of her synergy in Hela decks or just discard in general, she is going to go in the B tier for now. Alioth now. Alioth used to be really good. He's gone through a lot of different balance changes to make him seem more fair. Because in his original state when he first came out, let's just say there was Alioths everywhere. This card was not fun to play against and just completely ruined the whole experience of the game. But I do think he's in a good spot now. And he is deserving of an A tier ranking. Truth be told, the reason why there isn't that many, layers here, that many tiers, is because there's not a whole lot of, 6 cost cards, and there's not a lot of bad cards, I should say. So they all kind of have their place, they all have their fits in the meta. It's just a matter of, how good or how okay they are. There are certain cards that are trash that we'll get into, but most of these do have their place in the meta. Moving on to Apocalypse. Apocalypse, obviously you're only going to be running him in discard with things such as MODOK, Dracula, that good stuff. He is a good card when you can use him with other pieces. With that being said, he is reliant on other pieces. Without him, or without other cards I should say, he is not a good one. I think for the sake of this ranking, I will use other cards around them and where they are, like what decks that they fit into. Because if you're just going based off of the card text alone, I think it can be a little weird as far as rankings go. So I'm going to go with, their place in decks. So for example, Apocalypse decks are pretty good, are pretty solid. So with that being said, I do think Apocalypse is deserving of an A tier card. Next up, we have Zola. Zola is interesting because obviously in destroy packages, destroying your null and putting it in 2 different locations is extremely cracked. Beyond that, there isn't a whole lot that Zola can do. He does have weird applications, in terms of when you have Mr. Negative decks that he was good in for a long time. He still is good in. There's other decks, there's other, small niches that you can fit Zola in to make it work. Even like discard with Dakin and Bullseye. So he fits in the meta and he has a spot, but I don't think he's worthy of an A tier for right now. I think B tier works just fine. Blob. Now Blob is interesting because when he first came out, he was kind of like Alioth in that he was everywhere. There was no real way to counter him very well, unless you obviously had Shang-Chi, but even then it was just, it got crazy because it could scale to infinite power because it just ate your deck. There was no limit, I should say, when it first came out to Blob's power. It just ate your whole entire deck. And people would stuff their deck with all of these cards over here, all these high powered cards, and they could sometimes get all the way up to, for example, 70, 60, 50, and they would just go ahead and play their Taskmaster after that, and it was game over. But I do think Blob is in a healthy state now, and honestly, he's not that great anymore, so I don't even think he's deserving of A tier. I do think he fits here in the B tier. Again, Death is not a 6 cost, so we're going to go ahead and disregard Death. Moving on to Destroyer. Destroyer, I don't think there's really any two ways about this. He's trash. There's there's no real way to use him. The only way you're going to use him is in some weird sort of destroy package that somehow runs Colossus. A lot of bots run Destroyer as well, which I think is self-explanatory as to why this card is in trash tier. I just don't see any real application for him. He's just a big strong card. But his effect just kind of limits you in what you can do. So with that being said, Destroyer is our first trash card of the tier list. Dr. Doom is a great card. Obviously, he fits in the meta in a lot of different ways. You can play him in almost anything. But he does have his spots. I'm teetering here with S and A just because Doom can just fit in a lot of different areas, and in the decks that he does go in, he is quite great. There was that Doom 2099 deck that was going around for a long time before Doom 2099 itself got nerfed. But that being said, that's Doom 99. That's not Dr. Doom, the 6'5 Dr. Doom. So I think for right now, I'm going to put him at the top of A. This could change. So if you disagree, that's okay. But this could change as we go throughout the rest of this tier list and see what other cards land. Hulkling, again, no two ways about it. This card is just trash. You can get lucky sometimes with what he pulls and what he copies, I should say. But most of the time, you just end up with a 612 that doesn't really do a whole lot, or just ends up hurting you anyway. So again, he's not too different from the regular Hulk, because like I said, sometimes it's just a 612, and he ends up copying. For example, like you can get unlucky and copy an Infinite. That's always a fun time. But copying things like Odin are fine. Again, that's also depends on what kind of deck you're running. If it's an unrevealed deck, that would depend on that, of course. He could copy other things that could be potentially beneficial, but I think he is just too dependent on high rolls, and he can low roll you quite terribly. So with that being said, Hulkling deserves to be in the trash tier. Galactus is interesting because he used to take over the meta quite frequently, and he would just be everywhere. And with the junk decks, for example, like when Annihilus came out, Cannonball, all those junk style decks, Galactus is very good in. So I think with that being said, I do think he's an A tier card. Although I did just make a video that said Galactus was trash. Yeah, I'm gonna take this back. Actually, now that I think about it, Galactus is definitely going into trash. He's so telegraphable, you can easily see it coming most of the time if people know what they're looking for. So pretty big switch up, I guess, right there. I had to think about it there for a second. Kind of doing this off the cuff here. So Galactus is he's not at the bottom here. He's gonna go at the top of trash. He could go up to B here. But I think Galactus is pretty terrible as far as 6-cost cards. Giganto, he's good in discard decks, and that's about the only thing he's good for. So I think when you're so limited to an archetype, you can only go so high, obviously. So I think here Giganto is fine in B tier. Giganto over Galactus, but again, this could change. So we'll see how this goes. At least I feel like Giganto has a use, in Hella decks, which are pretty common right now. Whereas Galactus, he's just not used very much. And in the decks that he used it, is used in, like I said, he's just, you can tell he's coming. So I do think Giganto, simply because of Hella, deserves to be in B tier. Gore the God Butcher. I do think Gore is actually a really good card. So at the very least, he's going to go here in A. I think Gore fits in negative decks, obviously, just in straight up unrevealed decks. But I think sometimes he can be overshadowed by other 6-cost cards. More reliable options that don't have a condition such as having unrevealed cards in play. So I think for that reason, I think he's going to be an A for now. He'll go here at the top of A because he is a solid card. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and throw him right here. Heimdall. Heimdall is limited to essentially one archetype in Move, which Move in itself is not great. It's good, but it's not great. So if I was basing it off of that alone, Heimdall would have to go in the B tier. I'm going to go ahead and put him above Giganto here. Heimdall in B, only one archetype, can't really do too much with him. Sometimes he's just big stats. Otherwise, Move is the only place you can play him. So B tier is fine for Heimdall. Hela is obviously a 6'9 now. She's no longer a 6'7. So we're going to go ahead and disregard that 7 power there and pretend there's a 9. So Hella, obviously extremely good at what she does. She's a good card. When discard is popping, Hella's popping, and sometimes the meta is not fun when you play against Hella decks. You have to run Cosmo just to kind of see where she's going to, just kind of bring her down a little bit. Even then, Cosmo would have to be played essentially on the last turn in terms of trying to stop her, because obviously if you play Hella early, they're just going to play around it. There are ways to counter Hella, but I think Hella is really good in what she does. Therefore, I think she does belong in the A tier. Helicarrier, I don't know. I don't know. I think this card can teeter between trash and just okay. And obviously in Modok discard, things like that, it can be good. Just to fill your hand with things. For example, Collector. But other than that, Helicarrier is just a 6/10. And, you know, obviously you can only be so trash when you're, you know, a 6-cost card, when you're a 10 power card, right? You know, 10 power is never something to scoff at. In the grand scale of all 6-cost cards, and we're just looking at 6-cost cards, isolating them in a way, Helicarrier is not very good. Only really one application, and sometimes even isn't even good in that deck as well. So Helicarrier, I think, is another worthy contender in the trash tier. Hulk 612. No real thing to break down here. He's just a 612. He's good in high Evo decks. I think he's actually a strong contender for A tier. He's just big dumb stats. Again, with extra application in high Evo decks. So I do think Hulk is in between A and B here. I'm going to go ahead and put him in B for now. But this could change. Infinite is interesting because obviously he has his applications just like any one of these cards, but he's a lot more strict. 620, and you have to skip a turn to play him. Otherwise, you're gonna have to cheat him out somehow, which you can do pretty easily, but I just don't think he's reliable enough. So he's not, I'm obviously not gonna go in the S tier here. He could definitely be at the bottom of A just for what he can do. But yeah, I think I like the spot for now at the bottom of A. This stuff could change, so we'll see. We'll see how the rest of this goes. For now, Infinite is worthy of at least an A tier card. No, in Destroy decks, he can be absolutely cracked. Destroy decks, he's S tier. However, this isn't a Destroy ranking. This is a 6-cost ranking. So with that being said, he just actually got released, or not released, but dropped to Series 3, which is fun. But I think that Null is definitely worthy of an A tier. Obviously, like I said, he really only has one way he can work, which is in Destroy decks. But when he is in Destroy decks, he is just too good to be down any lower, I should say. So Null, A tier, moving on. Leader is teetering again between trash and B. There's just very minimal application. When he gets his value, he gets his value. But when he doesn't, he's just not very good. So for right now, I'm going to put him in trash just because I just don't think he's on the same level as even these B tier cards. So Leader is going to go down in the trash tier. Moving on to Living Tribunal. Living Tribunal is interesting. It's a good card. Ongoing decks, Iron Man, all that good stuff. Amazing. But being countered just by a Enchantress? Ah, man, that's tough. Tribunal definitely has its place in the meta. I do think he's worthy of A tier. Like, he can be in any one of these tiers, depending on the opponent and what they play. He can be an easy S tier, because when you hit him, he hits. You know, you can get like hundreds of power in each location when he hits, which is an obvious S tier. He's A tier, which is, he can be okay sometimes. He can be good sometimes. He can also be mid sometimes. He can also be trash sometimes. And I think the same goes for a lot of these cards. But if we're just looking at this based off of text and the decks that they go in, I do think Tribunal is worthy of A tier right now. Looking over this, I think more cards could be deserving of going into the S tier. I just didn't want to be too generous with my ranking of S tier, because I do believe that it belongs to very specific cards and shouldn't be oversaturated with a bunch of cards. Again, like I said, all 6-cost cards are relatively good. It's just, you know, in terms of 6-cost rankings, this is where I have them. Magneto, 612 moves 3 and 4-cost cards. He's a good card. I think he's worthy of A tier. He can lose you games sometimes, but most of the time, you know, you get opponent disruption and you get obviously a lot of power in that location that you play him in. So I do think Magneto is worthy of A tier here. Moving on, Mockingbird, and we have our first S tier card. No matter how many times this card gets nerfed, this card just lives in this game. It lives in the meta. It doesn't leave. It's always going to be there, especially as long as Zoo is, you know, active. Mockingbird is always going to be active. Getting a 0-9, come on, This is just it's too good. It's too good. Mockingbird, amazing S tier card. Even as a 4 cost, you get a 4-9, a 3-9. Like you can't really scoff at that. So I think Mockingbird is worthy of the S tier. Odin is a little hard to rank. Obviously, he's a card that you get really early on, but I do think he's a good card. You know, he has his applications. Obviously, just regular on reveal decks. You have Wong decks and things of the nature. So he's a good card. I think he's fine in the B tier. I don't think, you know, he just does very simple things. You know, he just repeats the on-reveal abilities. So he can be really cracked, but at the same time, he's on a normal everyday, you know, day-to-day basis, he's fine. B tier. Onslaught is kind of just the antithesis of Odin, literally in the sense that, you know, your ongoing effects are doubled with Onslaught. So I think with that being said, Onslaught is deserving of B tier as well. Although he could easily jump to A tier, depending on the deck he's in and depending on the situation. But I think just as a card itself, actually, yeah, I'm gonna move him up to A tier. I think A tier is fine. Onslaught and just ongoing in general just seem to be a little better than, you know, your on reveal stuff. So I think Onslaught is deserving of A tier here. Orca trash. Red Hulk. Here we go, Red Hulk. So I think Red Hulk is another one where he can be really cracked. And yeah, what are we playing around for? This is S tier. This is S tier 6 cost card. If you're ever struggling with, you know, what 6 cost card to put in your deck, if you just need to fill a slot, just put Red Hulk. I mean, if the opponent floats, you just get +3. You get +3 every time. So obviously this card has had his, you know, fine tunings in the past. Used to be really cracked. I think he used to be 4 power every time, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, no, Red Hulk is good. There's no way to go about it. He's just a better Hulk in a way, because most of the time your opponent's going to float energy at least 1 turn. So he's going to go to a 6-13. He's just good. There's no way of 2 ways about it. He's just good. Sasquatch. Sasquatch is interesting simply because he can be good in, for example, he can be good in bounce decks. Bounce decks have a home for him. There's also other decks that I've tried that, you know, have worked with him. When you play like things like Mysterio. So when you get the right combo, Sasquatch is nothing to dismiss. He's a good card. Is he A tier? Not quite. Is he trash? He's not trash. He's B tier. He's fine. He can go above here. You know, now that I think about it, I think Agatha is just going to go in trash. Agatha does not deserve the B tier with these cards. Agatha is just going down to the bottom. She's not very good, so we're just going to leave it at that. Anyway, Sasquatch, he's a good card, B tier. She-Hulk, high Evo decks, you know, decks where you float energy, you know, when she's a 0-10, amazing. Even 4-10, 3-10, that's awesome, you know. Same thing with Sasquatch. She can be really good. She can also just be a 6-10, which is, you know, just fine. But as far as, you know, her ability and what you can do with her, does she belong in A tier? She could. I think with the limited application and sometimes her just being a 6-10, nothing crazy. I think B tier is just fine for her right now. Spectrum, she's obviously a 6-7 now, so you can disregard the 6 there. 6-7 Spectrum, she gives +2 power to all of your ongoing cards, which obviously in ongoing decks can be really good. I think Spectrum alone, sometimes she hits, sometimes she misses. I think she can be worthy of the bottom of A. So I'll leave her there for now, but this could change. I might move her down to the top of B. Taskmaster obviously used to be really good when he was a 5 cost card. He used to be 5. He was a 5-0. Obviously popular in negative decks, really good there. He was really popular also in Red Skull decks, you know, Sauron Red Skull decks. Literally, you would just play Sauron, play Red Skull on 5, and Taskmaster on 6, along with maybe like a 1-drop such as 0, or somehow you could try to cheat out Ebony Maw just in some way, shape, or form. I think Taskmaster is fine. He's good at what he does do, but he's very limited in his application. So he's not quite trash, like, because he can be good, but I think he's just fine in the B tier here with the rest of these other cards. He can be good, but he's not good all the time. So B tier for Taskmaster. Thanos, the Mad Titan, has had a lot of balances to sort his way in the meta, find his way in the meta, if you will. He used to be everywhere. I remember there was a time, I can't remember exactly how long ago it was, over a year ago by now. Thanos, you couldn't play ladder without running into Thanos. Sometimes, you know, back-to-back games, even, you know, 3 times in a row. He was so popular at one point. But now he's a little bit more tame. They've kind of found his balance a little bit. So I think he's fine in the A tier. He's a good card. Yeah, you have the stones, obviously, to sort of give you flexibility. So I think he's a good card. He belongs in the A tier. Ultron. There's no two ways about it. Ultron's either going in B or trash. And that's going to be dependent on how you hit him. For example, if you play an Iron Lad and you copy the Ultron, you're going to be in shambles and it's going to suck, right? But in the decks that he is played in, you know, he can be really, really good. Iron Patriot, not Iron Patriot. Yeah, no, obviously not Iron Patriot. Just regular Patriot. Jeez, I got those two mixed up. Just regular Patriot, you know, and you have your Mystique. You obviously can have your Onslaught if you can cheat him out somehow. If you have a turn 7, or if you can, you know, get extra energy, you can cheat out Onslaught and then play Ultron on 6. Obviously, he's going to do really well there. But I think since his application is so limited, he's not as versatile as the cards in A tier, but he's not as trash as the cards in, you know, the trash tier. So I think Ultron is fine in the B tier. And going on to our last card in Isan, the latest release, Isan. Truthfully told, I don't have this card yet. I could, you know, spend my keys and get him, but in the gameplay that I have seen, he's really good in the decks that he goes in. I don't think he's quite deserving of S tier here. Too early to tell, and you know, he could obviously get nerfed, or he just won't work as well once people figure it out. So I think A tier is fine for Isan. Looking at the list here, I am happy with the B tier, and I'm happy with the trash tier. However, I do think there are a couple cards that are worthy of S tier that are in the A tier currently. Dr. Doom, he's S tier. He's an S tier card. Simply spreading out 15 power across the board can really steal you games a lot of times. And like I said, he can fit in a lot of different decks, and what he does, it's an overall good ability. You pair it with Kamar-Taj, you know, you're repeating it twice. Wong, there's a lot you can do with Doom. So for that reason, I'm moving him up to S tier. Another one I'm gonna go ahead and move up to S tier is Null. Null is really good. Obviously, all of these decks are gonna have their specific niches, right? But I think Null is just so good in Destroy that it's hard to not put him in S tier. He belongs there, obviously. He's really good. And you pair him with things like Zola, you know, he's gonna do great things. So Null, another worthy contender in the S tier. And the last card that I think I want to move up to S tier, again, she has her decks, right? She has her decks. She can be kind of limited. I should say extremely limited in what deck she's in. But similar to Null, when she hits, she is cracked. That's Hela. Hela, extremely meta relevant right now as well. Really popular in the meta, especially with Scar moving up to a 7 cost. She's really good. Yeah, Hela, she's just good when she hits. You know, just like Null, when it hits, it hits. So I think she's worthy of S tier. I think the rest of this is fine. Like I said, I'm fine with my B tier. I'm fine with my trash tier. I think A tier is fine. Obviously, you know, mileage is going to vary. This is obviously dependent on experience with the card and obviously how you feel. Everyone's going to have a different opinion. I think this is fine for right now. Let me know where you disagree with me down in the comments. Tell me what I got wrong. Tell me what I got right. Am I stupid? Do I suck at the game? Maybe. Leave it down in the comments below. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning into this video. I know it's a tier list video, kind of lazy, kind of overdone. I do have a video in the pipeline that I'm working on, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, here's my 6 cost tier list ranking. Hope you all enjoyed.